Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Cuccini. I'm here again to tell you about another book that is nominated for the Young Reader's Choice Award this year, which again, if you're just looking for a good book to read, these are always really good recommendations. I always love the books that are nominated for this award, or you can read it as part of my Young Reader's Choice Award Challenge, which I've been thinking more about, and in the past, you would have to read 5 books from these nominee lists to get a big prize. But this year, it's 2020, and it's so hard to concentrate on anything. If you're able to read at least 2 of these books, 2 or more of these books, I will get you some type of prize. I promise. It would make me so happy if you read 2 of these books. Anywho, another quick reminder, these are the 3 different. My cat is being very vocal today. Sorry if you hear her meowing in the background. But these are the different age categories of the Young Reader's Choice Award. The book I'm going to tell you about is another one from the intermediate category. So anyone in middle school or high school can read this book. I actually think this book is geared more towards mature readers. There's really only one scene in this book that takes place in a boys' locker room. If that gives you any hints about this scene, that might be slightly inappropriate. That might shock a 4th grader. So I really do recommend this just for middle school and above. But overall, it's really not an inappropriate book or anything. But the book is Darius the Great is Not Okay. And I actually read this book a few years ago. All the books that are nominated for this award are always a few years old. I don't know if I said that before. The people that set up this award do it on purpose. They only take nominees that are a few years old, so that if you want to read all these nominees and buy the books yourself, you can find them in paperback because they're much cheaper in paperback, but it takes a few years for books to come out in paperback. So that's actually another reason why I like this award. They try and make it more fair for people to get the books if they want them. But anyway, so I remember being blown away when I read this book. It was one of my favorite books that year, and it won a bunch of awards that year as well. And this is another, I think, this book is a really good example of titles and covers and how they can really sell a book, because I love the title of this book. I think it really just is interesting. I don't know, it just is a really interesting title to me. Anyone who's ever felt not okay, might want to pick up this book and relate to it. And the cover is just gorgeous. I love this cover art. But Darius the Great is Not Okay actually starts in Portland, Oregon, with Darius, who is a loner. He's a nerd. He suffers from depression. He works at a tea shop, so he's really into tea. I'm really into tea, and I live in Portland, so I was already really into this book when I started it. But it doesn't take place in Portland for too long, because soon Darius and his family all travel across the world to Iran. And so I'm actually going to start by telling you a little bit more about Iran. So there it is with my very fancy circle that I did around it. So you can see Iran is sandwiched between Iraq and Afghanistan. So 2 big names you've probably heard a lot in your life. It's close to Saudi Arabia and India. So a really important country in terms of history and location. But our country and Iran have not had good relations, pretty much ever. And it's currently run by this pretty horrible dude, this dictator. And so it's hard with countries like these because we only see all the negatives in the news, all the ways that our country doesn't like their country, wars that are happening over there. And you start to lose sight of the fact that, actual human people live here and have important lives and stories and contributions to the world. And Iran in particular used to be the heart of the Persian Empire. If you remember hearing about Persia back in middle school when you learned about ancient civilizations, extremely important in terms of culture and art. So much comes out of this country. It's a really rich country. And so probably the only other book I'd read that takes place in Iran is Persepolis, which I just wanted to bring up because it's another book that we do have in our library. It's a graphic novel, has a really interesting, distinct style. It was also turned into a movie in the same type of style as the book is. Won a bunch of awards, and I've actually worked in high schools that teach this book in their English class. There's a lot of colleges that teach this book. So if you haven't heard of it, I thought I'd put it in your radar because it's a pretty important piece of literature. But it's also really intense. This book deals a lot with the social, political history of Iran and also America's involvement in Iran, which is not always great. But Darius the Great, on the other hand, is very different from Persepolis because it's very personal. So you don't get a lot of, political, social commentary in here. It's just a story about Darius and his family and their lives. So the reason that he goes to Iran is because his grandparents still live there. And his grandpa is sick, like about to die. So basically, this is a trip to see grandpa for the last time before he passes away. And it's also going to be Darius's first real trip to Iran, where he's never been before, even though it's part of his, family heritage. And so when he gets there, a lot of this book is about his family, getting to know his family and his culture better. A lot of it is about his depression. And I really think that this book summarizes what it feels like to live with clinical depression, meaning it's been diagnosed by a doctor. He's taking antidepressants for it. His father had depression too, so it's been passed down. So, depression is a disease. It's not something that's wrong with you. It is your brain not functioning properly. And so he takes, these drugs to try and help him, which his grandparents don't really understand. So there's kind of some cultural, misunderstandings about mental illness and stuff like that in this book too. But I think you just really feel what Darius feels. And even if he's not okay a lot of the time, a lot of this book is also funny and interesting and light. So it's not like super heavy. Like I actually found this book really easy to read. And sometimes when I read really heavy books about mental illness, it's hard for me to get through them just because of the subject matter. But this went fast. It was light and funny and interesting at the same time that it really impacted me. But the main thing that happens in this book is that he finds a friend. He becomes friends with this kid in the neighborhood who knows his grandparents, and they play soccer together. They sit out on, this roof and look out over Tehran, where the main city in Iran where this takes place, and just have kind of conversations about life. And Sohrab, the neighbor that he becomes friends with, is very different from Darius, not just because he grew up in a different country, but he's very friendly and outgoing and different from Darius, who is not any of those things, but they still form this friendship. And it's really the friendship, in addition to getting to know his family a little bit better, that helps Darius feel a little bit better than not okay. So I loved this book. It's just fantastic. I do want to point out something else about this book, because I don't know, some people might have heard other things about this book. There is a sequel that just came out this year called Darius the Great Deserves Better. Another amazing title, amazing cover. I actually have not read it yet. I am going to buy it for the library, but I haven't yet. But you can kind of tell, even just in this cover, that the sequel deals much more with Darius being out as gay. And so I just wanted to mention that in the first book that I'm talking about here, Darius the Great Is Not Okay, Darius being gay is never even really mentioned. So this is not a coming out story. If you're looking for a book like that, there's lots of other books I'd probably recommend over this one because it's not really an issue. You can kind of guess that Darius, like I kind of guess that Darius might be gay, but it's never, openly talked about at all. And that's not really what this book is about. It's more about him getting to know himself as a person and working through his depression more than anything else. But then the sequel deals more with him coming back to the States, being more out, and what happens after that. So that is Darius the Great is Not Okay, one of my favorite books and a nominee this year for the Young Reader's Choice Award. It just got really sunny in my house, making my face very shiny. Good point to end this video. But I miss you guys. I'll be back with the next nominee in a couple weeks when I do my next newsletter. All right, talk to you soon.